Burkina Faso has just delivered one of the biggest shocks to the world economy, a $50 billion mega deal with Canada, not for gold, not for oil, but for medicine. This agreement is more than a contract. It's a power move that threatens to rewrite the future of Africa, challenge the global pharmaceutical giants, and force world powers to pay attention to a nation they once ignored. And before we dive deeper into how this deal changes everything, make sure you subscribe. Because the truth about what's unfolding in Burkina Faso will surprise you even more in the minutes ahead. The deeper you look into this deal, the clearer it becomes. Burkina Faso is no longer playing defense. It's stepping onto the global stage as a disruptor. The world wasn't ready for this. A press conference in Ouagadougou turned into a global earthquake. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso, announced a deal that no analyst saw coming. A $50 billion partnership with Canada to build one of the biggest pharmaceutical industries in Africa. For decades, Burkina Faso was dismissed as a weak, aid-dependent country. Today, it is suddenly positioned as a player in global health care. News agencies called it unthinkable, markets jolted. Even rival governments were caught flat-footed. Africa is often boxed into a stereotype, a supplier of raw materials, gold, cocoa, uranium, oil, dig it, ship it, sell it cheap. But Traoré flipped the script. He asked, why can't Africa lead? In the industries that actually save lives? Africa spends over $40 billion every year importing medicine, drugs it could produce itself. And during global crises, Africa is always last in line. Ebola, COVID, malaria vaccines, history has shown it again and again. So Traoré made a daring choice. Skip the traditional path of mines and oil rigs. Build medicine factories instead. When rumors spread of a mega deal, everyone expected China, Russia, or maybe Turkey. But then came the shocker. Canada. Why Canada? Because Canada brings pharmaceutical know-how, biotech research, and credibility in Western markets. For Ottawa, this isn't just trade. It's a geopolitical chess move, winning influence in Africa, showing itself as a partner without colonial baggage, and outmaneuvering France, which once saw Burkina Faso as its backyard. This isn't charity. It's a giant leap. $50 billion will build research hubs, high-tech medicine plants, logistics networks, and even training academies for African scientists. Entire new industrial cities are planned, with campuses, labs, and housing for thousands of workers. Burkina Faso is calling it Africa's Silicon Valley for medicine. When Traoré stood before his people, he didn't talk about profits. He talked about survival. His words echoed, "We will no longer depend on outsiders for the medicine that keeps us alive." This wasn't just economics. It was national liberation, the same spirit that once fueled anti-colonial struggles. Except this time, the battlefield isn't guns, it's healthcare. Pharmaceutical giants in the US and Europe are panicking. For decades, Africa was their guaranteed market. They controlled the patents, they dictated the prices, and Africans had no choice but to pay. But now, if Burkina Faso and Canada succeed, drug prices will collapse, Western monopolies will crumble, and billions in profits will evaporate. This deal doesn't just challenge them, it threatens their very business model. Look at the map. Burkina Faso is landlocked, but it's central, a bridge to West Africa. From here, medicine can flow into Mali, Niger, Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, and beyond. In logistics, location is power, and suddenly, Ouagadougou, once ignored, could become the healthcare capital of West Africa. Canada isn't blind. They know Africa is the world's fastest-growing market, with a population set to hit 2.5 billion by 2050. For Canada, this deal is about future-proofing influence. While America flexes military muscle and France clings to its colonies, Canada is winning Africa with science, medicine, and partnership, and it's working. Here's the irony. Much of the raw material for medicine already comes from Africa. Plants, herbs, and minerals. For centuries, outsiders looted them, refined them abroad, then sold the finished drugs back to Africa at 100x the price. This time, the tables turn. Burkina Faso wants to control the full chain, from raw resources to the pill in the patient's hand. Unemployment is Africa's ticking time bomb. Millions of graduates leave universities with no future, fueling migration, instability, and poverty. But this deal changes that. Tens of thousands of jobs will open, not just for factory workers, but for scientists, doctors, engineers, and entrepreneurs. For the youth, it's a message. Your future is here, not abroad. Africa's story has long been one of dependency, a continent rich in resources, yet forced to import what it needs most, life-saving medicine. During COVID, while Europe and the US hoarded vaccines, African nations waited helplessly. People died not because cures didn't exist, but because the West refused to share. This humiliation became a turning point. Traoré's declaration to his people hit like a thunderclap. Never again will Africa beg for medicine. Never again will our survival depend on outsiders. It wasn't just rhetoric. It was a vow to break the chains of dependency that had strangled Africa for centuries. And this $50 billion deal was the first hammer strike against those chains. This deal is not just factories and equipment. It's brains, skills, and future leadership. Canada pledged a massive educational exchange program. Scholarships. For thousands of African students, research fellowships in Canadian labs, and joint biotech projects. Imagine young Africans studying in Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa, then returning to Ouagadougou with world-class expertise to build Africa's own medical empire. Traoré was adamant. This industry will not be foreign-owned. It will be African-driven. That means pharmacists, engineers, scientists, managers, and innovators will come from within the continent. For the first time, Africa won't just host the factories, it will produce the experts who run them. In Washington, Paris, and Brussels, alarm bells rang. This wasn't just a medicine deal, it was a symbol of defiance. Western officials saw the bigger picture. If Africa learns to stand on its own feet in healthcare, what's next? Agriculture, technology, defense. A self-sufficient Africa is the West's worst nightmare, because for decades their power relied on Africa's dependency. Behind closed doors, whispers turned into strategies, pressure campaigns, sanctions disguised as health regulations, propaganda framing Traoré as reckless. They know that if this deal succeeds, Africa's entire dependency model could collapse. No country felt the sting more than France. For over a century, Paris had been the master of Burkina Faso's destiny, controlling its economy, politics, even its currency. French pharmaceutical companies once had a chokehold on African medicine imports, but in this deal, France wasn't even consulted. Traoré went straight to Ottawa. The humiliation was sharp and deliberate. He wanted to send a message not just to Paris, but to every African watching. We are no longer France's colony. French media erupted, politicians scrambled, and analysts admitted openly. France had lost its grip. The balance of power in Francophone Africa was shifting, fast. Russia and China, long active in Africa, were watching with sharpened interest. Both had invested heavily in mining, energy, and infrastructure. But medicine? That was new ground. If Canada's model works, expect Moscow and Beijing to roll out their own pharmaceutical megadeals. China, with its massive manufacturing power, could flood Africa with cheaper technology. Russia, eager to defy the West, could position itself as Africa's protector against Western pharmaceutical bullying. What began as a Burkina Faso-Canada agreement could spark a new Cold War in Africa, this time not over oil or uranium, but over vaccines, antibiotics, and the future of human survival. For generations, African families have buried loved ones from preventable diseases, malaria, cholera, tuberculosis. Why? Because medicine was too expensive, too scarce, or arrived too late. Now imagine malaria treatments produced in Burkina Faso at half the cost. Imagine HIV drugs accessible to every patient without foreign aid. Imagine vaccines developed and distributed across Africa without waiting for permission from Europe. This is not just an economic revolution. It's a revolution of dignity and survival. Millions of lives saved, billions of dollars kept in Africa, and a continent finally holding the power to protect its own people. On TikTok, Instagram, and X, Twitter, Africa's youth are electrified. Memes of Traoré as a superhero flood social media. Some show him holding a pill bottle like a sword, others depict him breaking the chains of dependency. Hashtags trend across West Africa. Africa rising, pharma freedom, Traoré visionary. Young Africans, often disillusioned with politics, suddenly have hope. They see this as proof that their continent can lead, not just follow. Traoré has become a symbol, not just for Burkina Faso, but for an entire generation demanding independence and pride. But the excitement isn't universal. Inside Burkina Faso, skeptics are raising alarms. Opposition leaders warn of hidden traps. Will Canada exploit us the way France once did? Will this deal truly help the poor or just enrich the elites? Some fear corruption will swallow the billions. Others worry foreign corporations will sneak in through the back door. Traoré's greatest challenge isn't just signing the deal, it's proving day by day that the benefits reach ordinary Burkinabe. If he fails, this revolution could collapse from within. For Canada, this deal is about more than money. It's about image and influence. While the U.S. is seen as a global bully and France as a colonial master, Canada has always tried to project itself as the friendly partner. This deal cements that reputation. Suddenly, Canada looks like the bridge between Africa and the West, a trustworthy ally who offers partnership, not domination. Diplomatically, this could be a jackpot. Canada gains allies in a continent of 1.4 billion people, builds influence in the global South, and proves it can outmaneuver even France in Francophone Africa. But make no mistake, the West won't just roll over. The pharmaceutical giants, with billions at stake, are already preparing their counterattack. Expect lawsuits over patents, attempts to block African medicine exports, smear campaigns labeling African drugs as unsafe, and quiet lobbying in Washington and Brussels to isolate Burkina Faso's industry. This isn't just a trade deal anymore. It's a pharmaceutical war. A war where the battlefield is Africa, the weapons are medicine, and the prize is control over human survival. And at the very center of this storm is a country the world once dismissed as powerless. Burkina Faso. This deal is not just about factories and money, it's about power. For decades, African nations had to depend on Europe, America, or Asia for life-saving drugs. Now, Burkina Faso is flipping the script. Imagine African leaders no longer flying to Paris or London to beg for vaccine shipments, but instead boarding a plane to Ouagadougou, seeking partnership with Traoré's new medical hub. Medicine, once a tool of control, is becoming a tool of diplomacy. Burkina Faso could decide which countries get cheaper access, who gets priority in times of shortage, and who must wait. That turns medicine into leverage, the kind of leverage only the West used to have. If managed carefully, this shift could make Burkina Faso the heartbeat of African health policy. For the first time, African nations may rally behind an African supplier instead of being chained to Western pharmaceutical monopolies. Numbers speak louder than words, and this number, $50 billion, is more than money. It's a declaration. For years, Africa has been painted as a land of aid, charity, and dependency. But $50 billion isn't aid. It's not a loan. It's a negotiation at the highest level. It says, "We are not beggars, we are builders, we are partners." This figure forces the world to look differently at Burkina Faso, a country many once dismissed as too small, too poor, too weak to matter. And yet here it is, striking a deal bigger than what some European countries could even dream of in their pharmaceutical sector. Symbolism matters in politics. It reshapes perception. The number $50 billion tells every African child watching, your country doesn't have to be at the bottom of the chain. It can stand tall, demand respect, and change its destiny. This deal doesn't echo only in Africa. It's resonating across the entire global South. From Asia to Latin America, leaders are applauding Traoré's boldness. Why? Because they see in him a reflection of their own struggles. For decades, the Third World has been treated as raw material suppliers, while the West controlled the finished products and the wealth. Now, one of their own has broken the cycle. Imagine leaders in Brazil, India, or even Venezuela watching Traoré with admiration, thinking, if Burkina Faso can challenge the giants, why can't we? This isn't just an African story. It's a global South awakening. It's about nations rising together, supporting each other, and pushing back against a system that kept them divided and weak for so long. Traoré may have signed a deal for Burkina Faso, but the political earthquake it triggered spans continents. But history whispers a warning. Whenever African leaders dared to build true independence, the reaction was swift and brutal. Muammar Gaddafi tried to launch an African currency backed by gold, and we all saw what happened to him. Thomas Sankara tried to make Burkina Faso self-reliant, and he was assassinated. Patrice Lumumba dreamed of freeing Congo from foreign control, and he, too, was eliminated. The pattern is clear. When African leaders rise too high, powerful interests move against them. Traoré knows this. By stepping into the pharmaceutical industry, he is entering one of the most guarded monopolies in the world. Big Pharma doesn't tolerate competition. Western governments won't like losing influence. There will be pressure. There will be attempts to sabotage. There may even be direct threats to his leadership, his country, and his people. The question is, can Traoré survive what history has thrown at so many before him? Signing a $50 billion deal is historic. But building it into reality? That's the real test. Medicine factories don't operate in thin air. They need electricity that doesn't cut off every 2 hours. They need modern roads to move raw materials and finished products. They need trained scientists, labs, and cold storage facilities. Burkina Faso, like much of Africa, struggles with infrastructure gaps. But here lies the brilliance of the deal. It's not just about pills and vaccines. It includes massive investments in roads, electricity grids, water systems, and universities. This means the $50 billion doesn't just create a medicine industry. It transforms the whole economy. Jobs will be created not only in factories, but in transport, construction, engineering, and education. Entire cities could rise around these medical hubs. If executed properly, this deal could lift millions out of poverty while giving Africa something it never had before: independence in healthcare. In Traoré's vision, this deal isn't just about factories and exports, it's about people. And at the heart of this transformation is the empowerment of African women. Historically, African women have carried the weight of community health on their shoulders. From traditional healers in villages to frontline nurses in hospitals, they have been the backbone of public health. Yet, when it comes to leadership in science, pharmaceuticals, and global trade, women in Africa have often been sidelined. This deal changes that. Traoré specifically emphasized the role of women in the new pharmaceutical ecosystem. Scholarships for young African women scientists are already being discussed. Research labs will actively recruit female chemists, biologists, and pharmacologists. And beyond the lab, women entrepreneurs will be given opportunities to run distribution networks, manage hospital partnerships, and spearhead public health campaigns. Think about the symbolism. A young Burkina Faso woman, once limited to working in underfunded clinics, could now be leading the production of life-saving vaccines for the entire continent. This is not just economic empowerment, it's a cultural revolution. By giving women a central role, Burkina Faso ensures this deal isn't just about GDP growth, but about a generational shift in leadership. History has shown us that when one African nation takes a bold step, others soon follow. Burkina Faso's $50 billion medicine deal with Canada has already sparked conversations in neighboring Mali, Niger, and Guinea. These three countries, which share both cultural ties and political alliances with Burkina Faso, are watching very closely. Why? Because they too are tired of being import-dependent for basic medicines. Across West Africa, over 70% of drugs are imported from Europe or Asia. This dependence keeps prices high, makes supply chains vulnerable, and drains billions of dollars out of African economies every year. Now, Burkina Faso has given them a new model, one that is African-led, international in partnership, but rooted in sovereignty. Analysts are already predicting that Mali and Niger could join hands with Ouagadougou to form a West African pharmaceutical alliance. Imagine an entire regional market where medicines are produced locally, prices drop dramatically, and access improves for tens of millions of people. And it's not just about health, it's about politics. Such an alliance would strengthen the new Pan-African bloc that is rising, one that rejects dependency and builds collective strength. Traoré may have lit the first match, but the fire is spreading fast across the region. When the news broke, global media outlets scrambled to cover the story. Headlines screamed, "Burkina Faso signs mega deal with Canada. $50 billion pharma shock from Africa." But look closer and you'll notice something interesting. African outlets celebrated loudly, calling Traoré a visionary, a disruptor, and even a pharmaceutical liberator. Canadian media hailed it as a historic economic partnership. But Western outlets? They were cautious, even nervous. The reason is simple. This deal represents a shift in global power dynamics. If Burkina Faso can do it, why not Congo with its cobalt? Why not Ghana with its cocoa? Why not Nigeria with its oil? The West fears that this story will inspire a wave of nations to renegotiate deals on their own terms. Some American and European newspapers downplayed the news, focusing more on risks than opportunities. They raised doubts about Burkina Faso's infrastructure, governance, and security, as if to plant seeds of doubt. Yet, despite the cautious framing, they could not ignore the facts. A small, landlocked African country just signed one of the largest medicine deals in history. For ordinary Africans watching from home, this media split told them everything they needed to know. The West may be worried, but Africa is rising, and Traoré just forced the world to take notice. For Traoré, it's not just medicine. It's about sovereignty, controlling Africa's future. He is rewriting the rules of African leadership. This may look like just one contract, but it marks a seismic shift. Africa stepping onto the world stage as an equal player. Burkina Faso's $50 billion medicine deal shows the future isn't about resources alone, but about knowledge, science, and power on Africa's own terms. And this is just the beginning. Subscribe now to follow the rise of Africa's new era.